All right. Well, what do you guys know about it? How do you know Solomon wrote it? Yeah. I don't want to turn me down just a hair. Okay. So the world is that because I said that earlier. Yeah, if you've read it, right? No, I mean, but honestly, if you've read it, that's the conclusion, right? The conclusion of the whole matter. Sam, what were you saying? Yeah, yeah, it's kind of cool. And I was just up here texting. No, I was actually reading scripture on my phone because in First Kings chapter 3, really all of chapter 3 is really cool. Where Solomon asked God. Well, I'm going to go there real quick, and it's okay if we get diverted a little bit because it'll all come around and it'll all make sense. First Kings chapter 3. I'm going to read it because this is where Solomon gets the kingdom. And Solomon made affinity with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, took Pharaoh's daughter, and brought her to the city of David until he had made an end of building his own house and the house of the Lord. Which, if you remember the house of the Lord, who's Solomon's father? Who's Solomon's mother? Bathsheba. And you guys are familiar with the story with David and Bathsheba, right? If not, so David, he's on the roof one day, he sees this beautiful woman, Bathsheba. He desires to have her. He has a relationship with her. She gets pregnant. And so her husband is one of his great warriors. And so he tries to trip him up so it looks like he got his wife pregnant, but he didn't. And so there was consequences for his sin. The first child that they had, not Solomon, he was the second, died. And so there's consequences for a sin. But and you see this because here's what people say. Well, how could, if God's a good God, how could someone like David be someone after God's own heart and stuff? Well, here's why. Because David confessed when David sinned and he knew it was wrong. Remember, Nathan comes along and he talks about these little sheep and he's like, King David gets furious. He's like, well, if anybody does that, I'll kill him. And he says, you are the man. Well, David never built a house for the Lord. Why? Yeah, because he was a fighter, and he shed too much blood. And so Solomon is really, if you think about it, what do you guys know about Solomon, King David's son? Yeah, we're going to read that in here. Yeah, he had a kingdom of peace, and he was one of the. I believe this, and I think we'll see it in this passage. But I believe he was the wealthiest man that ever lived. Now what happened to it? Well, we're going to see in Ecclesiastes. What happens to a man's wealth? Well, it might be handed down to this part of his lament that he has. It might be handed down to a foolish child or something like that. But so we're going to read chapter 3 of First Kings. There's a reason why, because we're going to see where his wisdom comes from. Sam's talking about this. I think he was one of the wealthiest men. We know in this passage we're going to see he's going to be blessed above all the other kings. He lives in a time of peace. He builds the temple for God. He's blessed with doing that. Um, the problem is I think Solomon starts off strong and he finishes weak. And I believe, and I think if we look at the book of Ecclesiastes, tell me what you think, Sam, but this is a man looking over his life and realizing the decisions he's made and the things that he's done. And it's kind of like, if I could have done it all over again, this is what I've learned from my mistakes. And that's what I love about the book, because Solomon would be I don't like to use people's names, but he'd be your Elon Musk, but godly. Right? I mean, he'd be someone he was born as a king, and he was born into the kingdom, but he had more wealth than anybody in his time. And people would come because he had this wisdom, and they would come to hear his judgments and to hear his wisdom, and they would give him money for it. And so the Queen of Sheba comes, and the problem was Solomon married a lot of women. He had a lot of concubines, and the women are the ones that kind of led him astray and led him away from the Lord. I believe that with all my heart when you study it. But Solomon, so he makes peace with Pharaoh's daughter with Egypt, and took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David, and he made an end of building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall of Jerusalem round about. This is 1 Kings chapter 3. I'm in verse 2. I didn't tell Gregory this because I didn't plan to go here, but then I did. Only the people sacrificed in high places because there was no house built unto the name of the Lord until those days. Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father, only he sacrificed and burnt incense in high places. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, and there was the great high place. 1,000 burnt offerings did Solomon offer upon the altar. In Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I shall give thee." Let me stop there. If God came to you in a dream, or if he basically came to you and said, "What do you want me to give you?" How would you answer that question? Honestly. Yeah, you have to answer right then, right? Yeah. Yeah, we think about money, we think about fame, well, I don't know that he probably thought about fame because he was famous, because he was David's son, right? Maybe. And I'm going to continue reading because I love what Solomon says. And I'll be honest, I'm not saying this because I'll share with you, but I pray for God all the time for wisdom on how to lead his people because of this passage. Not because I expect God to bless me, In fact, we see this in Matthew, right? When Peter's like, "Well, we've left everything, Lord, to follow after you." Don't think that thought has never gone through my mind, but it's true. God has blessed us with a larger family than I've ever had, more than I've ever had. And so it really is true. And when you ask the Lord for his wisdom, because James talks about that, ask him for the wisdom of the Lord. I got to read through here. It's so good. Solomon said, "Thou showed unto thy servant David, my father, great mercy, according as he walked before me in truth and in righteousness, uprightness of heart with thee. And thou hast kept for him this great kindness. Thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, and I'm but a little child. I know not how to go out or to come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude." Here's what he asks for. "Give, therefore, thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this, thy so great a people?" And the speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said unto him, "Because you have asked this thing, and you have not asked for yourself long life, neither have you asked for riches for yourself, or you've asked for the life of your enemies, but you've asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment. Behold, I've done according to your word. Lo, and I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall there arise any like unto thee. And I've also given thee what thou hast not asked, both riches, honor, so that there shall not be any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. And if you will walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days." Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And he came to Jerusalem, and he stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered a burnt offerings, and offered peace offerings, and made a feast to all his servants. Now, this is kind of free, but I have to add this in there because I absolutely love this passage. Put yourself in this position. You're king, you're a judge, and this situation happens. Then came there 2 women that were harlots unto the king, and stood before him. The one woman said, "O my lord, I and this woman, we lived together in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the 3rd day after that I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also." So this lady's saying, 2 women come before King Solomon, and they both had babies. Okay? And this woman, there was no stranger with us in the house except the 2 of us. And this woman's child died in the night because she rolled over on it, basically. And she arose at midnight. She took my son from beside me while thy handmaid slept, and laid it on her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. When I rose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son which I did bear. And the other woman said, "No, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spoke before the king. So here's what happens. Two women had babies. One of the babies died in the night. The woman took the dead baby off of her and put it on the other woman, and took the living baby and put it on her. And she said that this is my child, though it wasn't. So imagine being the king and you're posed with this, right? Have you ever heard that you know that show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? This is a lot harder decision than that. There's a life at stake here. The king said, the one saith, This is my son that liveth, the other, and thy son is dead. The other says, No, but the son is the dead, and my son is the living. The king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king, and the king said, Divide the living child in two, give half to the one and half to the other. Good wisdom, right? You'll understand in a minute. Then spoke the woman whose living child it was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son. And she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor the other, but divide it. Wow. Then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. Talk about a difficult thing though, right? But I love because this is what he prays for. He doesn't say, Give me money, but because he didn't pray for that, because he prayed for God's wisdom. Let me put in the bold print, not the fine print. Just because you pray that way doesn't mean God's going to answer the same as Solomon. All right? You can't, God, give me wisdom, because you're really saying, God, I want money. It's not going to work that way. Now, God could do that, right? But here was Solomon, who was king over all of Israel, and he recognized the great responsibility that it was. And so you look in the very first judgment that he has to make, you've got two women, and it's like they're both claiming for the child. He doesn't know whose child it is. But just through the wisdom that he had, he says, okay, cut the child in two, knowing that the real mother would be like, no, don't kill the child, let her have him. And they could immediately discern that that was her child and not the others. Because the other lady's like, okay, kill it and I'll take half. And that's kind of gruesome. But I like that example, because what does Solomon do? He prays for wisdom. What kind of wisdom? Godly wisdom, so that he could rule his people, to discern from good and bad. Now, later in his life, do you think Solomon really applied that to his life? I kind of feel like, and we were talking about this, right? I think he starts off strong and finishes off weak. Who's another person you can think of that starts off strong and finishes weak? He was a king, Saul. Yeah, he was a man chosen by God. And really, when you looked at Saul, I loved how they put it. He was head and shoulders above the rest. He was good looking. And Saul started off good, finished terribly. Why? Because he didn't follow and obey the Lord. And so as we come to the book of Ecclesiastes, now, and I already gave you the background as how I chose it, but I want to give a little bit of background on the book. Solomon, I believe, wrote it, and I think we're going to see this in chapter 1, verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now, it couldn't be many other people, maybe Jeroboam or Rehoboam or whoever the other sons were, but it really, I think it points to Solomon. The theme of the book is life under the sun is meaningless apart from God, but true purpose and joy are found in fearing God and obeying him. The key verse that we would find that in is Ecclesiastes 12:13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. The author, it's traditionally attributed to Solomon, and we'll see that in Ecclesiastes. Well, we've already read that. It was written approximately, I don't think we know exactly, but somewhere around 935 BC, so probably about 930-ish years, 33 years before Christ. So quite a time before Christ. The meaning comes from the title, which is the Hebrew word Koheleth. I probably said it completely wrong, meaning teacher or preacher. The purpose of the book is to show that everything in life, apart from God, ultimately leaves us empty, and that true meaning comes only through a relationship with God. How does it fit into Scripture? It is one of the wisdom books. If you're like, well, what books are wisdom books? Job. And I would say, here's the theme of Job. Why do the righteous suffer? And here's what I would give you the answer on that in a short summary, because God allows it. How do we, Psalms is another wisdom book. How do we worship God? Ecclesiastes, what is the meaning of life? Proverbs, how do we live wisely? Song of Solomon, what does godly love look like? Ecclesiastes addresses one of humanity's deepest questions. What is the purpose of life? Uh-huh. Yeah, all right. Well, English, teacher or preacher. In Hebrew, it's Qoheleth. You could sound fancy, and then if you could say it, you could sound really fancy because I can't say it. It exposes the emptiness of seeking fulfillment in wealth, pleasure, success, knowledge, work, possessions. The book prepares our hearts for the gospel because it shows our needs for something greater than what this world has to offer. So we're going to start. I'm going to basically read chapter 1, and then we'll probably go back and look at some of the verses. I actually have some questions. I could do a printout. I don't know. Do people like printouts? All right. Well, maybe I'll do that. I could. So for next week, I'll do a printout, and I'll put that questions in there and give you a place to do notes. I'm not going to do, just so you know, I'm not going to do the fill in the blank like Mary does. I don't have the time that she does to do all that. And she does it a whole lot better than I do. So let's read Ecclesiastes, verses 1. We'll just read the whole thing and we'll go back and we'll touch on some verses. Now, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to ask you to tell me what you think or what stands out to you. I'm just telling you that now so you know ahead of time. All right? The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Let me pause. What is vanity? What is he saying in here? What's that? It's another form of pride. Something that just being wasting time in. He's wasting his time. Now, let me give you the translation in the Hebrew. The Hebrew word is hebel. Let me see if I can do it. Hebel, Hebel. It means breath, vapor, or mist. It describes something as temporary, fleeting, difficult to grasp. It doesn't provide lasting satisfaction. Why am I giving you this definition now? Because as we read through it, then you can think through that. You're going to hear this other word, vexation. Vexation, what's the way he puts it? Vexation of, I'll have to find, spirit. That's what I thought. So vexation is striving after the wind. It gives the picture of trying to catch the wind in your hands, trying to control the wind, and trying to hold on to it. So it's basically impossible. So it is basically describing something that's temporary, impossible. It's kind of like trying to grasp a hold of something that you can't hold on to. I'll give a good example. My puppy Remington. That's vexation. I can't hold on that boy, man. He's a little... Actually, I can't control him a little bit, but... So that's the purpose as we read through. So he says, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man of all his labor which he takes under the sun? One generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and it hastens to his place where he arose. The wind goeth towards the south, and turneth about unto the north, and it whirleth about continually. And the wind returneth again according to his circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. All things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done. And there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It hath already been of old time, which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. The preacher was king over Israel and Jerusalem. And I gave my heart to seek and search out wisdom concerning all things that are done under the heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanton cannot be numbered. I communed with my own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I gave my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly, and I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit. For much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. Wow. Kind of sounds depressing, doesn't it? Yeah. It is a vicious cycle, though, isn't it? What do you guys, when we read through this, what comes to your mind, or what do you think of? Maybe you've studied through this, and that's good. I don't think, and I'll be the first to say this, I don't think as we go through the book of Ecclesiastes, we're going to be hitting things that we've got to go into deep explanation. That's part of the reason why I didn't want to do it. After 1st and 2nd Corinthians, I want to come to something that's a little bit easier to understand. I think we can all relate to this. It can be a little wordy. It can be a little philosophical. I kind of like that. I think that's the way Solomon is. I think that's the way they were in their time. Their knowledge and their experience and things like that comes in their words and how they speak. But he's speaking, and I believe this, and we'll see this as we go through the book. He's speaking as a man that's older in life, that has experienced life. And he's going to draw the conclusion that we already talked about, but he's going to go through and he's going to talk about different aspects of life. What do you think he's talking about in this first chapter? Mark.
So we may do things differently or use different technologies or methods. Humanity really doesn't change over time.
Yeah. And I think we could see that in some of the verses. And I kind of feel like in chapter 1, life without God, it's empty. Right? And he's going to build, he's making a thesis. Or if you've ever written a paper, who in here has ever written a term paper or written those papers? You know, you've got to go in and you've got to state what your argument is. I've never been real good at this. And then you've got to back it up and then you conclude. And that's what he's doing. He's starting off and he's saying that, right? And when he uses in verse 3 this saying, what profit is a man of all his labor which he taketh? These 3 words, under the sun. What he's pointing to is he's pointing to those things within, I read it down, but I can't read it, life outside of God's design. Does that make sense? It's kind of like the world, right? And if we look at the world, we could see this. The world will say one thing, but God says something different. And if we're honest with ourselves, we can look at the world and how much can the world really satisfy? You can answer that question. Yeah. Hey, Gregory. Yeah, everything on this earth, can you put the fan on? It's hot in here. Life, what were we saying now? Sorry. Nothing in this world can satisfy. I mean, it can, right? Let's be honest. There are things in life that are good, right? I'll use myself as the example. I remember we moved to the UK. I love Land Rover Defenders. You know, they're cool looking, they're tough looking. And I remember thinking, you know, you look at Land Rover Defenders, we could fit our whole family. They're kind of expensive. There's really nothing glamorous about a Land Rover Defender. It is, as Mary calls it, a bucket of bolts. You know, the first one I got, it didn't even have power steering. So like when I drove it, I'd be like fighting with this thing to steer it. But I used to tell myself, man, if I could get a Land Rover Defender, I'd be happy. I bought my first Land Rover Defender, and after trying to drive that thing and shifting it, you know, when you don't have power steering in town and you're like fighting with this thing, we finally got to the point we drove Mary's car all the time because that thing was a beast. Then I got really good, and I'm like, I found another Land Rover Defender, a newer one, had air conditioning. But air conditioning in Land Rover Defender is different than, or at least in the 2000 model year that I had. It's a little different. Is anybody familiar with vintage air? It's kind of like that. It's this little strip that goes underneath the dashboard. And on a day like today, it don't do anything. Now, it's kind of ironic. When you have a Land Rover Defender, people never say anything. Like, we had a Nissan Pathfinder, was Mary's car. We used to drive all the time because, you know, it was a 2004, I think it was, or 2007. It had all kinds of cool technology, like you could walk up and touch the handle and it opened the door. And I'll say this, best thing they ever did was put that 2.5 liter diesel in it. You can't kill it. This car was awesome. Everybody's like, that's a big, massive car. And I'm like, what about the Land Rover Defender? It overshadows it. But because it was a British car, it was all right. I bought this Land Rover Defender, the second one. And my goodness, you could ask Gregory. I tried to teach him to drive manual on it because they were manual. And you get a leg workout driving it. And I loved it. Mary tell you, I had a big old grin on my face, but there was nothing fancy. The doors didn't shut. It leaked. It had all kinds, And we tell ourselves, well, if I just have this, I'll be happy. And we really deceive ourselves with that. What else do we know about Ecclesiastes, or what stands out? And there's a lot in this first chapter, and we're not going to have time to go through it all. We'll hit probably half of it and finish it next week. I spend a lot of time on the front side. That's okay.
This is probably not what I'm looking for. What stood out to me when we got towards the end when he said to himself, my Bible says, I am wiser than any of the kings who rule in Jerusalem. So that just points back to Solomon.
Yeah, it does point back to Solomon. I think it builds the case for him. Yeah. Yeah. What else? I think there's kind of two sections here, right? He builds his thesis. He kind of talks about, and then the second half, verses 12 on, he goes on and talks about himself. But he starts off by talking about the things that he's noticed, right? He says, all is vanity. What profit is a man of all his labor which he takes under the sun? Here we go. We see one generation passes away and another generation comes. The earth abides forever. Man is not in the world's perspective, right? We do know we're eternal beings, but on the earth, this body, our physical bodies, we know this 100% are going to die, right? One generation, the sun, it arises and sets down. And here's the thing, right? Here's kind of the point he's making in this verse right here. The sun arises, the sun goes down, and it hastens its place where he was. The wind goes towards the south. He's talking about nature here. And it turns about the north, and it whirleth continually, and the wind returns again according to the circuits. The rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full unto the place whence the rivers come, neither do they return again. And he's talking about nature in this, and here's kind of the point he's making. And you guys can relate to this in Indiana. We can have a rain, but one rain is never sufficient, right? Because then it gets hot and it dries up. You've got these cycles of nature, but yet it's never complete, right? You don't have the sun come up one time and it continually stays up. It goes down. There's nothing that's common that's going to last. And this is the point that he's going to build through here. Nothing is going to satisfy. All things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. The thing that has been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done, that which shall be done. And I like this statement, and we're going to talk about this. This is probably where we'll stop. There is no new thing under the sun. Let me ask this question. Is there anything new under the sun? You say no. I'm going to challenge you in this. I'll make a side note. You're right, but I'm going to challenge you in this, right? Because somebody might say, well, what about, we send spaceships up to the skies and, we've got internet technologies and smart cars. We got cars now that can drive themselves. And what do you think the point that he's making? There's nothing new under the sun. And you're right. No. Yeah. You look at the Tower of Babel, right? Yeah. Like Jennifer was saying, there's always something being created. They always think it's the next, right? It's the thing. And I think he's talking about in here, not so much things, but people, right? There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new. And I would say this because I think you're right in this, right? We've created things. I'll go back to the Tower of Babel. Man was creating this tower to reach God, and God separated them by languages. The pyramids, we still can't figure out how they made them. So as we know, man is not stupid. Man is smart. Man was designed with a mind that I think some of the things they did, Mary was talking like, as she's studying through the Old Testament, they had running water and cisterns and, so man is not dumb. So there's nothing new, but the heart of man has never changed, and there's nothing new under the sun. And I would say this, I was reading J. Vernon McGee, and I love the illustration that he had. He said, my great-grandfather, he proposed to my great-grandmother on a horsehair couch. And my grandfather, he proposed to my grandmother on a horse and buggy on the way to Tyler, Texas. And my father, he proposed to my mother on a railroad train or something like that. And then he said, and I proposed to my wife in my car. And what he was saying was like, yes, it was different means by which they did it, but the proposal was the same. The emotions were still the same. Marriage is still the same. There's nothing new under the sun. There was kind of a joke when I worked at Cherry Street and I was talking with the youth pastor. He's like, there's nothing new in ministry. He's like, everybody takes what everybody else uses. But it's true, there's nothing new in Scripture. We'd like to think that there is, but God's word has never changed. He's not given us some brand new special revelation. He doesn't need to. His word is complete. We can trust in him. And here's what happens. We're always looking for that new thing, that better thing. Why? We think it's going to bring us happiness, right? That new person, that new wallet, that new car, that new whatever. If I just had a new Land Rover, I'll be honest, I like the new Land Rovers, but they're stupid money. And I'll be honest, I struggle to think that they'd be that reliable. I don't know. And I might buy one and I'd be happy until it breaks down, right? Or until it gets 100,000 miles on it, or until the next new one comes out. And that's what they do. I was telling somebody, we were talking soccer, and I was explaining to them, like in the UK, they have 3 kits. They call their uniform kits. Well, here's why. Every year they come out with a new kit. And there's a home kit, an away kit, and a third kit. And you know why they do that? Because it makes money. That's why. Because the fans will buy, oh, look at the new kit. I've got to have the newest kit. And I don't buy them until later in the season to see if they have a good season, because I don't want to wear a kit if they have a terrible year. And I also don't want to pay full price for them because they're like $160 for a shirt. I'm like, I'd never pay that much for a shirt. But that's what they do. And it's like, oh, look how awesome this is. And they're going to have an incredible year. And that's what we do. We look at everything and we have these expectations. And I'll be honest, nothing ever changes with my team. They usually don't do that good, and maybe they'll do good, but there's no promise that you could look at, you guys probably don't know this, but you could look at Manchester City and Pep Guardiola comes in and they win like 7 championships. Now he's left and they didn't win last year. Liverpool won, and there's no team that will win every year indefinitely. You know, sooner or later they're going to lose and things happen, and, and we put all of our hope. You guys know, I'll give you an example. You guys like the Colts. I don't need to say any more. There's nothing new under the sun, right? I mean, let me go up to verse 11 and then we'll finish it. It says, is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new, it has been already of old time, which is before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. He's going to go on, and we'll talk about the second half next week. But it's a beautiful book because here's it reminds us of some things. I'm going to bring in the questions next week, but here I'm going to throw them out to you so you can ponder these in your heart. I want to make you very philosophical this week. Where have I been looking for meaning apart from God? What earthly pursuits tend to consume my thoughts and energy? Am I seeking temporary satisfaction instead of eternal purpose? How has God shown me that this world cannot fully satisfy? What changes can I make to pursue God more intentionally this week? How does the brevity of life affect my priorities? I like that last one. How does the brevity of life affect my priorities? I would say for most of us, when we're young, we think we're bulletproof and life will never end. But I think if you've been given a diagnosis, that could be a life-altering diagnosis. If something in your life has happened that drastically can change it, priorities tend to shift. Let's pray. Father, I pray that as we go through the book of Ecclesiastes, more than anything, it points to our need of you. Though Jesus isn't mentioned, God is mentioned so many times. And it points to the fact that life outside of seeking God's purpose for our life is meaningless. And so I pray, Father, that as we continue through Ecclesiastes, that we draw closer to you, that we see through the wisdom. And I think that's sometimes what we need. We need to see other people's failures. We need to see other people's wisdom. We need to listen to people who've gone through it and experienced it. And hopefully that will help us to see that a relationship outside of one with you is a meaningless relationship. Father, that we need you first and foremost in our lives. And as the lawyers tried to trip up Jesus and say, what is the greatest command? And Jesus said it so clearly, to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. Then the second is likened unto it, to love our neighbors as ourselves. I think that's kind of the heart of the book of Ecclesiastes, to realize that everything from you is good. Everything from the world can be deceptive. It's not that it's bad, but if we place all of our faith in the world, we're going to be let down. So, Father, I pray that you have your will and your way in our hearts as we go through this study, and I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.